My husband spent our entire life savings on a luxury vacation with his mistress. He thought I'd never find out, but when I did, I made sure he'd lose everything, including the designer watch she bought him with my money. The shrill sound of my phone's notification pierced through the peaceful Saturday morning. I was enjoying my coffee on our patio, scrolling through social media when my friend Jessica's message popped up. "Sarah, I don't know how to tell you this, but I think you need to see something." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Attached was a photo that would shatter my world, forever. There, on my screen, was my husband David, wrapped in an intimate embrace with a woman I'd never seen before. They were standing on what looked like a private beach, the crystal-clear waters of the Maldives stretching endlessly behind them. The timestamp showed it was from just 3 days ago, when David was supposedly at a critical business conference in Chicago. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The coffee cup slipped from my trembling hands, shattering on the patio tiles. The sound matched perfectly with how my heart felt in that moment, broken into 1,000 pieces. David and I had been married for 12 years, and for the past 6 months, we'd been supposedly saving every penny for our dream house. I'd been bringing lunch to work, canceling my gym membership, and even selling my designer bags to contribute to our savings account. "There's more," Jessica's next message read. "She's been posting about their trip all week. Sarah, she's wearing the diamond bracelet you thought David bought for your anniversary." My hand shook as I scrolled through the woman's public Instagram profile. Her name was Victoria Chen, a 28-year-old luxury real estate agent. Post after post showed her and David living it up at a 5-star resort in the Maldives. Sunset, dinners, champagne breakfasts, private yacht tours. Each swipe felt like a knife twisting deeper into my heart. But it was her latest post that made my blood run cold. There she was, lounging by an infinity pool, caption reading, "When he empties his savings account just to give you the vacation of your dreams. Sorry, wifey, but he clearly knows where to invest his money now. Blessed by our luxury, life our spoiled girlfriend." The audacity, the disrespect, the sheer cruelty of it all hit me like a tidal wave. This wasn't just an affair. This was theft. This was betrayal on a level I couldn't even comprehend. Our entire savings account, nearly $200,000 we'd spent years building, gone in a flash for his midlife crisis fling with a woman young enough to be his daughter. I sat there, frozen, as memories flooded my mind. David's late nights at the office, his sudden business trips, the mysterious calls he'd take in another room. All the signs had been there, but I'd been too trusting, too devoted to our marriage to see them. Just last month, he'd convinced me to invest another $50,000 from my personal savings into our joint account, claiming he'd found the perfect property for our future home. The numbness began to fade, replaced by something darker, something more powerful. Rage. Pure, unadulterated rage coursed through my veins as I scrolled through more photos. There was David, wearing a new Rolex, bought with our money, no doubt. There he was again, feeding her caviar on a private beach. Each image was another nail in the coffin of our marriage, but also another piece of evidence in what would become my master plan. Because in that moment, as I sat surrounded by the shards of my broken coffee cup and broken dreams, something inside me changed. The loyal, trusting wife who would have done anything for David died on that patio, replaced by a woman who would stop at nothing to get justice. Victoria thought she had won, flaunting her stolen luxury lifestyle on social media. David thought he could play me for a fool, spending our life savings on his mistress while I ate packed lunches and sold my belongings. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I picked up my phone again, my hands no longer shaking. First, I took screenshots of everything, every post, every caption, every flaunted expense. Then, I opened my banking app. My suspicions confirmed as I saw our joint savings account had been completely drained. But what they didn't know was that I had something they didn't expect: leverage. Years of working as a financial advisor had taught me more than enough about protecting assets and tracking money trails. I smiled as I dialed a number I never thought I'd need to use. "Hello, is this Claire Morrison? This is Sarah Matthews. You helped my friend Rachel with her divorce last year. I need the best forensic accountant you know, and I need them today. Money is no object. After all, my husband has so generously demonstrated that spending big is perfectly acceptable now." As I waited for Claire to call me back, I started making a mental list of everything I would need to do. Bank statements, credit card records, property deeds. I would leave no stone unturned. David and Victoria thought they were living their best life in paradise, but they had no idea that their paradise was about to become their worst nightmare. Because while they were sipping champagne and watching sunsets, I was about to unleash a storm that would wash away everything they thought they had stolen from me. And when I was done, they would learn the hard way that karma, much like a scorned wife with evidence of financial fraud, can be absolutely devastating. Claire called me back within the hour, her voice filled with a mixture of sympathy and professional determination. "Sarah, I've got Marcus Reynolds on board. He's the best forensic accountant in the state, and he owes me a favor. Can you meet us at my office in 2 hours?" I was already dressed and grabbing my car keys before she finished speaking. As I drove to Claire's downtown office, my mind raced with possibilities. I thought about all the times David had insisted on handling our finances, claiming his business. Experience made him better suited for it. How convenient that had been for him. How naive I'd been to trust him so completely. The sleek office building loomed before me, its glass exterior reflecting the bright morning sun. Claire's office was on the 20th floor, with a view of the city that usually took my breath away. Today, I barely noticed it. Claire greeted me with a warm hug, then introduced me to Marcus Reynolds, a sharp-eyed man in his 50s who looked like he could find a needle in a haystack of bank statements. "Mrs. Matthews," Marcus began, but I cut him off. "Please call me Sarah. I have a feeling we're going to be working closely together." He nodded, spreading out a notepad. "Sarah, Claire's filled me in on the basics, but I need you to tell me everything. You know about your financial situation with your husband. Every account, every investment, every property. Leave nothing out." For the next 3 hours, we meticulously went through my entire financial history with David. Our joint savings account, our investment portfolio, our property investments, and even my personal accounts that David had convinced me to give him access to just in case. As I spoke, Marcus took detailed notes, occasionally asking pointed questions that made me realize just how thoroughly David had orchestrated his deception. "There's something that doesn't add up," Marcus said, frowning at his notes. "The withdrawals from your joint account for the Maldives trip and the luxury purchases total about $200,000, but based on these transactions over the past year, there should be more money missing. A lot more." Claire leaned forward, her legal instincts kicking in. "What are you thinking, Marcus?" "I'm thinking Mr. Matthews has been siphoning money away for quite some time. These regular transfers to what looks like a legitimate investment account? They're too neat, too regular. We need to trace where that money really went." My heart pounded as I realized what he was suggesting. This wasn't just about the Maldives trip. This wasn't just about Victoria. This was about years of systematic financial betrayal. "How long will it take to trace everything?" I asked, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "Give me a week," Marcus replied, his confidence reassuring. "I'll find every penny he's tried to hide." As Marcus began his investigation, Claire turned to me with a serious expression. "Sarah, we need to talk about immediate action to protect what's left of your assets. First, we need to freeze any joint accounts he hasn't already drained. Then, we need to document everything. Every transaction, every purchase, every piece of evidence of his infidelity and financial misconduct. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I nodded, pulling out my phone to show her the screenshots I'd taken of Victoria's Instagram posts. Claire's eyes widened as she scrolled through them. This is, actually incredibly helpful. She's literally documenting their misuse of marital funds on social media. But we need more. More? I asked, raising an eyebrow. We need to prove a pattern of deception, Claire explained. The vacation spending is obvious, but if Marcus is right about long-term financial misconduct, we need to build a solid case. Do you have access to David's emails, his phone records, credit card statements? I thought about it for a moment. I have access to our shared cloud account where he backs up his phone. He thinks I never check it because I'm not tech-savvy enough. He used to joke about it. Claire's smile was predatory. Perfect. People get careless when they think they're smarter than everyone else. But before we dig deeper, we need to get you some protection. I'm calling in another favor. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. Hey, Rachel. Remember that PI you used during your divorce? Is he any good with digital surveillance? She listened for a moment, then smiled. Perfect. Can you send me his number? Turning back to me, Claire's expression was determined. We're going to need eyes on David when he returns, not just for evidence of the affair, but to track his movements, his meetings, anywhere he might be hiding assets or making plans to hide more. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Sarah, V just posted another story. They're extending their stay another week. David's claiming his business conference got extended. I showed the message to Claire, who scoffed. Another week of documented evidence? They're making this almost too easy. She paused, studying my face. Are you okay? I took a deep breath, surprised to find that I was. The pain was still there, but it had crystallized into something harder, something more focused. I'm better than okay. I'm ready to fight. Good, Claire nodded. Because we're not just going to fight, we're going to win. As I left Claire's office that afternoon, my head was spinning with everything we'd discussed. Marcus was already deep into his investigation of our finances. Claire was drafting preliminary divorce papers and preparing injunctions to freeze assets. The PI would be starting his surveillance as soon as David returned from his business trip. But I knew we needed more. I needed someone who could help me understand the real estate side of things, someone who could tell me if David had hidden properties I didn't know about. And I knew exactly who to call. My sister Lauren had been in real estate for 15 years. She had connections throughout the industry and, more importantly, she had never liked David. I'd always thought she was being overprotective, but now I realized she'd seen something in him that I'd been too in love to notice. I called her from my car, and she answered on the first ring. Lauren, I need your help, and you were right about David. I'm on my way, she said immediately. Meet me at Giovanni's in 30 minutes, and Sarah, we're going to destroy him. As I drove to meet Lauren, I thought about how quickly my life had changed. Just this morning, I had been a trusting wife, drinking coffee on my patio. Now I was assembling a team of professionals dedicated to uncovering every secret David had ever kept from me. Victoria's smug Instagram caption echoed in my mind. Sorry, wifey, but he clearly knows where to invest his money now. I allowed myself a small smile. She had no idea what was coming. They both thought they were so clever, living their luxury fantasy on my savings. But they were about to learn a very expensive lesson about karma, because while they were extending their paradise vacation, I was building an arsenal. And when they finally returned to reality, they would find that their paradise had become a war zone. David thought he knew everything about money and power? Well, he was about to learn that he'd married someone far smarter than he'd given her credit for, and by the time I was done, They would both wish they'd never underestimated me. Giovanni's was quiet for a Tuesday afternoon, the perfect place for the conversation I needed to have with my sister. Lauren was already waiting in a corner booth when I arrived, 2 glasses of red wine on the table. One look at my face and she knew this was worse than she'd imagined. "Before you say anything," Lauren began, sliding a glass toward me, "I want you to know that I've already made some calls. Remember Thomas from my office? He specializes in tracking property transactions, and he's found some interesting things about David's recent activities." I took a long sip of wine, letting its warmth steady my nerves. "What kind of activities?" Lauren pulled out her iPad, her perfectly manicured nails tapping the screen with purpose. "In the past year, David's been involved in 6 different property transactions, all through various LLCs. None of them are in your joint names, and none of them appear in any of the financial documents you've shown me." My hand tightened around the wine glass. "How much are we talking about?" "The properties combined? Over $2 million. Lauren's eyes met mine. "Sarah, where did he get that kind of money?" The answer hit me like a thunderbolt. 2 years ago, David had convinced me to sell my grandmother's property in the Hamptons, a beautiful beachfront home that had been in my family for generations. He'd said we needed the capital for a new investment opportunity that would secure our future. The sale had brought in just over $3 million. "That bastard," I whispered, the pieces finally falling into place. "He used my inheritance to build his own secret real estate portfolio." Lauren reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "There's more. One of the properties, a luxury condo downtown? Guess who's been living there rent-free for the past 6 months?" My stomach churned. "Victoria?" Lauren nodded grimly. "The utilities are in her name. He bought her a $900,000 condo with your inheritance money, Sarah." I felt the last pieces of my heart turn to stone. It wasn't just the Maldives vacation. It wasn't just the stolen savings. David had been systematically stealing from me for years, using my own family's money to fund his affair and set up his mistress in luxury. Just then, my phone buzzed with an email from Marcus Reynolds. The subject line read, "Urgent, financial. Findings." My hands shook as I opened it. "Sarah, I've completed the preliminary investigation into your husband's financial activities. What I've found is deeply concerning. Beyond the known withdrawals for the Maldives vacation, I've discovered a pattern of systematic fund transfers to multiple undisclosed accounts, substantial investments in properties not declared in your joint tax returns, regular cash withdrawals totaling over $50,000 per month for the past year by 4, multiple credit cards in his name only, with charges at high-end jewelry stores, hotels, and restaurants. Most critically, I've found evidence that he's been falsifying business documents to hide these transactions from you. This goes beyond simple financial infidelity. This is fraud. We need to meet immediately. Best regards, Marcus." I handed my phone to Lauren, watching as her expression darkened with each line she read. When she finished, she immediately pulled out her own phone and started typing. "I'm texting Claire," she explained. "This changes everything. We're not just dealing with adultery and stolen savings anymore. We're looking at systematic fraud. We need to move fast before he has a chance to hide anything else." As if on cue, my phone lit up with another Instagram notification. Victoria had posted again, this time a video of her and David on a private yacht, champagne glasses in hand. The caption read, "Living my best life with the man who makes all my dreams come true. Can't wait to start our new life together in our dream home. Blessed that's your new chapter." Lauren saw my expression change. "What is it?" I showed her the post, my voice eerily calm. "They're planning to move in together, into the condo he bought with my grandmother's money." "No," Lauren said firmly, already dialing Claire's number. "They're not? Because that condo and everything else he bought with your money?" It's all about to become part of the biggest divorce settlement this city has ever seen, Claire answered. On the first ring, and Lauren put her on speaker. Claire, we've got a situation. Marcus found evidence of fraud, and we've uncovered multiple properties purchased with Sarah's inheritance money. One of them is currently housing the Mistress. Perfect. Timing? Claire replied, her voice sharp with satisfaction. I've just finished drafting the emergency injunction to freeze all assets. With Marcus's findings and the property documentation, we can file it immediately. Sarah, are you ready to move forward? Once we file, there's no going back. I thought about David and Victoria, living it up in the Maldives with my money. I thought about my grandmother's property, sold under false pretenses. I thought about the years of lies, manipulation, and theft. Do it, I said, my voice firm. File everything. And Claire? Make sure the filing includes a detailed list of every property, every account, and every penny he's stolen. I want it all, to be public record. Consider it done, Claire replied. And Sarah? The PI started his surveillance. He's already gathered some very interesting footage of Victoria meeting with several of David's business associates while David's away. Apparently, she's been quite friendly with more than just your husband. A cold smile spread across my face. Save that evidence. We might need it later. As Lauren and I left Giovanni's, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. David and Victoria thought they were planning their perfect future together, but they had no idea their world was about to implode. While they were posting about their dream home and new chapter, I was preparing to take everything. The condo, the other properties, every asset he'd hidden away. You know what the best part is? Lauren said as we walked to our cars. They're so busy flaunting their affair on social media, they have no idea what's coming. By the time they figure it out, it'll be too late. I nodded, thinking about Victoria's smug posts and David's carefully hidden paper trail. They thought they were so clever, didn't they? Using my inheritance to fund their little love nest, hiding properties in LLCs, thinking I'd never find out. Their arrogance will be their downfall, Lauren agreed. Want to bet how long their perfect relationship lasts once all the money and luxury disappears? For the first time in days, I felt a genuine laugh bubble up inside me. I give it a week. Less if Victoria finds out about David's friendly business associates. As I drove home that evening, I thought about how differently this could have gone if David had just been honest, if he'd respected our marriage and the vows we'd made. Instead, he'd chosen greed and deception, thinking I was too naive to ever discover the truth. Well, he was about to learn just how wrong he'd been, because while he was sailing around the Maldives on my dime, I was preparing to take back everything he'd stolen, and then some. The emergency injunction would hit first thing in the morning, freezing every account, every property, every asset he thought he'd hidden away. And the best part? Thanks to Victoria's social media addiction, we had dated, time-stamped evidence of exactly how they'd spent my money. Every post, every photo, every smug caption would become evidence in the divorce proceedings. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But as I settled in for the night, reviewing the growing file of evidence on my laptop, I couldn't help but think that revenge served with a side of justice might be even better. Tomorrow, the real game would begin, and I was playing for keeps. Next morning dawned bright and clear, but I'd barely slept. I'd spent most of the night reviewing everything Marcus and Lauren had uncovered, each new detail feeding the fire of my determination. At exactly 9 a.m., my phone rang. It was Claire. "It's done," she said without preamble. "The emergency injunction has been filed and approved. Every account, property, and asset we've identified is now frozen. And Sarah? David just tried to make a withdrawal from one of his hidden accounts in the Maldives. It was denied." A smile spread across my face as I imagined David's reaction, standing at some luxury resort trying to pay for another extravagant excursion, only to have his card declined. How long until he figures out what's happening? Oh, he already knows. He's been calling the bank nonstop for the past hour. They're referring all his queries to his legal representative, which means me. Claire's voice held a note of satisfaction that made my smile widen. But that's not all. Remember that? PI I hired? He just sent over his first report and you're going to want to see this. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Claire's office, staring at a stack of photographs and documents that made my blood boil all over again. The PI hadn't just uncovered evidence of David's affair with Victoria. He'd discovered a whole web of deception that went far beyond what we'd initially suspected. As you can see, Claire said, spreading out the photos, Victoria has been busy while David's been arranging their little paradise getaway. These were taken over the past 3 days. The photos showed Victoria meeting with various men at upscale restaurants and hotels, all of them looking very intimate. But it was the identities of the men that really caught my attention. Are these, I began, recognizing some of the faces, David's business partners? Yes, Claire confirmed. Apparently, Victoria has been quite busy maintaining good relationships with all of David's key associates, but here's where it gets really interesting. She pulled out another document. According to our investigation, she's been receiving regular payments from at least 3 of them, all funneled through the same type of hidden accounts David used. I sat back, the implications hitting me like a wave. So, while David's been spending my money on her, she's been playing him like a fiddle, Claire finished, and profiting quite nicely from multiple sources. But wait, there's more. She pulled up an email on her computer. Marcus just sent this over. Remember those property transactions Lauren found? Turns out Victoria's been getting kickbacks from those too. She's been working with the real estate agents involved to inflate the purchase prices, then splitting the difference. My shock must have shown on my face because Claire quickly added, "This is actually good news for us. It proves systematic fraud and conspiracy. With this evidence, we can go after everything, not just your joint assets, but all the hidden properties and accounts too." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from David. What the hell is going on? Why are my accounts frozen? Call me immediately! Moments later, another message came through, this time from Victoria's number. You think you're so clever freezing the accounts? David and I already have everything planned. You can't stop us from being together. He never loved you anyway. I showed the messages to Claire, who practically purred with satisfaction. Perfect. They're panicking. And look, Victoria just confirmed their relationship in writing. Between this, her social media posts, and our other evidence, they don't have a leg to stand on. What's our next move? I asked, feeling more empowered by the minute. Well, Claire said, pulling out another document, now that we have proof of fraud and conspiracy, we can expand the injunction to include Victoria's assets too. After all, she's been knowingly profiting from misappropriated marital funds. I raised an eyebrow. Can we really do that? We can and we will. In fact, Claire checked her watch with a predatory smile. The papers should be being served to her right now, at her workplace in front of all her colleagues. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Jessica, who worked in the same real estate office as Victoria. OMG, Sarah. You won't believe what just happened. 2 officers just walked in and served Victoria with legal papers. She's having a complete meltdown in the middle of the office. She's screaming about how this is all your fault and how you're ruining everything. Everyone is recording it. I couldn't help but laugh. Karma really is something, isn't it? Claire nodded, but her expression remained serious. This is just the beginning. David's flight back is scheduled for tomorrow. Once he lands, he'll be served with papers too. But Sarah, you need to be prepared. He's not going to go down without a fight. Let him fight, I said, my voice steady. I have the truth on my side. And thanks to Victoria's social media addiction and their own greed, I have all the evidence I need. Just then, Claire's phone rang. After a brief conversation, she turned to me with a gleam in her eye. That was Marcus. He's found something big, really big. Remember how David convinced you to sell your grandmother's property? Well, he didn't just use that money to buy properties for Victoria. He used it as collateral for loans, massive loans, which he then used to make even more secret investments. How massive are we talking? I asked, my stomach tightening. Millions, Claire replied. And here's the best part. He used forged documents with your signature to get those loans. We're not just talking divorce court anymore. We're talking criminal charges. I sat there for a moment, letting it all sink in. David hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He'd committed actual crimes in his greed to build his secret empire. And he'd done it all while making me feel guilty for buying a cup of coffee instead of making it at home to save money. Claire, I said, my voice calm despite the rage burning inside me. I want everything. Every property, every account, every penny he's hidden away. I want him to lose it all. Oh, he will, Claire assured me. Between the fraud, the forgery, and the documented misuse of marital assets, we're going to take him for everything he's worth. And Victoria, by the time we're done, she'll wish she'd never heard the name David Matthews. As I left Claire's office that afternoon, my phone buzzed one final time. It was another Instagram notification. Victoria had posted again. But this time her tone was very different. Sometimes people aren't who they pretend to be. Trust no one. Betrayed our karma. I couldn't help but smile. It seemed Victoria was finally learning that lesson herself. And tomorrow, when David landed, he'd learn it too. Because while they'd been living their fantasy in paradise, I'd been building an ironclad case that would bring their whole world crashing down. They say karma comes after those who deserve it most. Well, karma had arrived, wearing designer heels and carrying a stack of legal documents, and it was about to hit them both like a ton of bricks. I was sitting in Claire's office when David's plane landed. We'd tracked his flight, knowing exactly when he would arrive, and had arranged for the process server to be waiting at the airport. Through the PI's live updates, we watched the scene unfold like a movie. He's just been served, Claire announced, reading from her phone. And, yes, he's having exactly the kind of public meltdown we hoped for. The PI is getting it all on video. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. David, of course. I declined it, watching as message after message populated my screen. What the hell is this? You can't do this to me? Answer your damn phone. You have no idea what you're doing. I'm going to destroy you for this. Each threat only confirmed that we'd made the right move. I showed the messages to Claire, who documented them with a satisfied nod. More evidence of threatening behavior. Keep saving everything. Has Victoria been served at the condo yet? I asked, thinking of the luxury apartment he'd bought her with my grandmother's money. Claire's smile was positively predatory. Oh, yes, and you're going to love this. She was there with one of David's business partners when the papers were served. The PI got photos of him trying to sneak out the back entrance. Just then, my sister Lauren burst into the office, her face flushed with excitement. You're not going to believe what I just found out. Remember Thomas, my colleague who's been tracking David's property transactions? He just discovered something huge. She pulled out her iPad, pulling up a series of documents. David didn't just buy properties with your money. He was running a full-scale real estate fraud scheme. He and Victoria were working together to inflate property values, forge documents, and scam investors. And guess who the investors were? His business partners? I guessed, thinking of the men in the PI's photos. Exactly, Lauren confirmed. The same ones Victoria's been entertaining. But here's the best part. They had no idea about each other. Each one thought they were getting an exclusive deal. And now that the properties are frozen and the fraud is exposed, they're all going to turn on each other, Claire finished, her eyes gleaming. This is perfect. Once David's partners realize they've been scammed? As if on cue, my phone lit up with a news alert. Someone had leaked information about the fraud investigation to the local business journal. David's name was splashed across the headline, along with allegations of massive financial misconduct. "Well," Claire said, scanning the article, "that saves us some work. Once this hits the mainstream media—" She was interrupted by a commotion in the outer office. Before her secretary could stop him, David burst through the door, his face red with rage, still wearing his resort clothes from the Maldives. "You vindictive bitch," he snarled at me. "You have no idea what you've done. I'll fight this every step of the way. You'll never see a penny." Claire stood slowly, her voice deadly calm. "Mr. Matthews, you are not welcome here. You can direct all communication through your lawyer, assuming you can find one willing to take your case once they see the evidence we've gathered." "Evidence?" He scoffed, but I could see the first flicker of fear in his eyes. "What evidence?" I nodded to Claire, who began pulling up documents on her computer screen, turning it so David could see. "Let's start with the forged loan documents bearing Mrs. Matthews' signature. Then we can move on to the fraudulent property schemes, the misappropriated inheritance funds, the hidden accounts." With each word, David's face grew paler. But it was when Claire pulled up the PI's photos, the ones of Victoria with his business partners, that he finally broke. She wouldn't," he stammered, staring at the images. "Oh, but she did," I said, speaking for the first time. "Just like you wouldn't spend our life savings on a luxury vacation? Like you wouldn't steal my inheritance? Like you wouldn't—" "Commit fraud in my name? Sarah, baby, we can work this out," he tried, his tone suddenly conciliatory. "This is all just a big misunderstanding. Victoria means nothing to me. She was just the woman you bought a $900,000 condo for with my grandmother's money?" I finished for him. "Just the woman you've been photographed with all over the Maldives while I was eating packed lunches to save money? That Victoria?" As if summoned by her name, my phone buzzed with another Instagram notification. Victoria had posted again. "When the truth comes out, and you realize you've been played, time to save myself. Sorry, not sorry." I showed David the post, watching as the color drained from his face. "Looks like your girlfriend is already jumping ship. I wonder how many of your secrets she's planning to share to save herself." "You don't understand," David said desperately. "The properties, the investments, it's all legitimate business. I can explain everything." "To the forensic accountants?" Claire interjected smoothly. "Or to the fraud investigators, because they're very interested in hearing your explanations." Just then, Lauren walked in, holding her phone. "David, perfect timing. Your business partners are all over the news, distancing themselves from you and denying any knowledge of the fraudulent schemes. They're calling for a full investigation." David collapsed into a chair, his resort tan unable to hide how pale he'd become. "This will ruin me," he whispered. "No, David," I corrected him, standing up to my full height. "You ruined yourself. Every decision, every lie, every betrayal, those were all your choices. I'm just making sure you face the consequences." "What do you want?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Everything," I replied simply. "Every property, every account, every asset you've hidden away, and a full confession of your financial fraud, including how you forged my signature and stole my inheritance. And if I refuse?" Claire smiled coldly. "Then we take this evidence to the district attorney. I'm sure they'd be very interested in the criminal aspects of your activities." David's phone began ringing, Victoria's face flashing on the screen. He declined the call, but not before we all saw the string of frantic messages from her. "David, they're saying we committed fraud. Your partners are talking to the police. Call me back now. I'm not going down for this." The man who had swaggered into the office minutes ago was gone, replaced by someone who finally realized just how completely his world was collapsing. "I'll sign whatever you want," he said quietly. "Just keep me out of jail." As Claire's assistant, led David out to begin the paperwork. I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. The man I had loved, the man who had betrayed me so completely, had finally been revealed for what he truly was. My phone buzzed one final time. Another post from Victoria. Sometimes karma comes for the people who deserve it most. Goodbye. Paradise. Hello, consequences. Lessons learned. I couldn't have said it better myself. Paradise was indeed over, and consequences had finally arrived, and they were absolutely glorious. The next few weeks unfolded like a masterclass in karma. While David had crumbled in Claire's office, agreeing to sign everything we put in front of him, Victoria proved to be less willing to go quietly into the night. But her desperate attempts to save herself only made everything so much sweeter. You need to see this, Lauren said, bursting into my new penthouse apartment one morning. I'd moved out of our shared home the day after the confrontation, using some of the newly recovered funds to rent a gorgeous space overlooking the city. Victoria just went on a local morning show to tell her side of the story. We pulled up the interview on YouTube, watching as Victoria, dressed in a conservative outfit that was a far cry from her usual revealing attire, tried to paint herself as an innocent victim of David's manipulation. I had no idea he was married, she claimed, dabbing at perfectly dry eyes with a tissue. He told me he was divorced, that his ex-wife had taken everything. That's why we had to keep our relationship quiet. Lauren and I exchanged glances, then burst out laughing. Within minutes, my phone was flooded with messages from friends and acquaintances, all sharing screenshots from Victoria's own social media, post after post where she'd tagged herself as the other woman and bragged about stealing someone else's husband. Should we show the TV station her posts? Lauren asked, grinning wickedly. The ones where she's literally wearing my grandmother's bracelet and hashtagging sorry wifey? No need, I replied, showing her my phone. Someone had already done it. The station's social media was flooded with screenshots of Victoria's posts, completely destroying her attempted redemption narrative. Within hours, they had to issue a public apology for not vetting their guest properly. But that was just the beginning. As news of David's fraud schemes spread through the business community, his former partners began falling over themselves to cooperate with investigators, each trying to minimize their own involvement. Another one turned on him today, Claire reported during our daily update call. James Peterson, the one who was photographed sneaking out of Victoria's condo? He's provided documentation of every fraudulent deal David ever proposed to him. And he's not the only one. The evidence kept piling up. Bank records, forged documents, fake investment proposals. With each new revelation, David's carefully constructed house of cards collapsed further. The man who had once prided himself on his business acumen and social standing was now a pariah in the very circles he'd once dominated. Victoria's fall from grace was equally spectacular. After her disastrous TV interview, more women came forward, with stories about her. Other wives whose husbands she'd targeted, other businesses she'd scammed. Her real estate license was suspended pending investigation, and her luxury lifestyle came to an abrupt end. Look at this, Lauren said one evening, showing me a listing on her iPad. It was for Victoria's condo, the one David had bought her with my grandmother's money. She's trying to sell it quickly, probably to cover her legal fees. But with the fraud investigation and property freeze, she can't. What a shame, I said, not feeling very sorry at all. How are those legal fees piling up? Claire had kept me updated on that front too. Victoria's attempts to distance herself from the fraud had backfired spectacularly. In trying to prove she was just an innocent bystander, she'd accidentally revealed details about other schemes we hadn't even known about. She's facing multiple charges, Claire confirmed. Fraud, conspiracy, receiving stolen property, and that's just the beginning. Her lawyer quit yesterday. Apparently, she can't pay her bills anymore now that all her sugar daddies have abandoned her. The karma train wasn't finished yet. A week later, Jessica sent me a video that had gone viral on social media. It showed Victoria being escorted out of a luxury department store, screaming about how her credit cards couldn't possibly be declined, demanding to speak to the manager. The same woman who had once bragged about spending my savings was now facing the harsh reality of life without access to other people's money. David wasn't faring much better. After signing over everything in exchange for Claire's help in minimizing his potential jail time, he'd moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of town. The last I heard, he was working as a junior sales representative at a car dealership. Quite a fall for a man who'd once claimed he was too good for any job that didn't have executive in the title. "How does it feel?" Lauren asked one evening, as we sat on my penthouse balcony, watching the sunset over the city. "Being the one who brought down their whole empire?" I took a sip of champagne. Real champagne, not the cheap stuff David had made me buy while he was spending our savings on luxury vacations with Victoria. "It feels like justice." My phone buzzed with a notification. It was from the real estate agency where Victoria used to work. They'd finally finished their internal investigation and wanted to thank me for my help in exposing the fraud. As a gesture of goodwill, they offered to help me sell the properties we'd recovered from David, including Victoria's condo. "Speaking of justice," I said, showing Lauren the message, "what do you think about turning Victoria's love nest into a women's shelter? Something good should come out of all this." Lauren's eyes lit up. "That would be perfect. Want me to make some calls?" As she pulled out her phone to start working on the arrangements, I thought about how differently everything had turned out from what David and Victoria had planned. They thought they could steal my money, my property, my dignity. But in the end, they'd lost everything while I'd emerged stronger than ever. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a news alert. Local woman turns ex-husband's fraud fortune into charitable foundation. The article detailed how I was using the recovered assets to help other women escape toxic relationships and financial abuse. The comments section was filled with supportive messages, including one that made me smile. "From victim to victor. Now that's what I call revenge served perfectly cold." They had no idea. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice, karma, and personal transformation all rolled into one. David and Victoria had tried to break me, but instead, they'd forced me to become stronger, smarter, and more resilient than I'd ever been. As the sun set on another perfect evening, I raised my glass in a silent toast. To new beginnings, to karma well served, and to the valuable lesson David and Victoria had learned the hard way. Never underestimate a woman who knows her worth. Because while they'd been living their fantasy in paradise, I'd been building something real and lasting, a legacy of strength, justice, and transformation. And that was worth more than all the luxury vacations in the world. 1 year later, I stood at the podium of our newly opened Women's Financial Freedom Center, formerly known as Victoria's Luxury Condo. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The very property that had once housed my husband's mistress now served as a beacon of hope for women escaping financial abuse and toxic relationships. Sometimes, I began my speech to the gathered crowd, the worst betrayals lead us to our greatest purpose. The audience, filled with supporters, survivors, and members of the press, listened intently as I shared the story of how this center came to be. Lauren sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Next to her was Claire, who had become not just my lawyer but a dear friend and board member of my new foundation. Together, we had transformed the pain of betrayal into something powerful and meaningful. "Mrs. Matthews," a reporter called out during the Q&A session, "can you comment on the recent news about your ex-husband and his former girlfriend?" I smiled, having anticipated this question. David and Victoria's story had become something of a cautionary tale in our city. After the dust settled from the initial legal proceedings, their lives had taken very different paths, both equally satisfying from a karma perspective. I think their situations speak for themselves. I replied diplomatically. But this center isn't about them. It's about helping other women avoid and escape similar situations. What I didn't say was that David had recently been spotted working as a junior sales associate at a used car lot on the outskirts of town, living in a small studio apartment above a laundromat. His attempts to rebuild his life had been hampered by the fact that nobody in the business community would touch him with a 10-foot pole. His name had become synonymous with fraud and betrayal. Victoria's fall from grace had been even more spectacular. After her failed attempt to play the victim, on local television, she'd tried to restart her real estate career in another state. However, her past quickly caught up with her. A quick Google search of her name now brought up countless articles about her role in David's fraud scheme, along with her own social media posts bragging about stealing a married man and spending his wife's money. Last I heard, she was working as a waitress in a small diner, her designer clothes and luxury lifestyle nothing but a distant memory. Her Instagram account, once filled with smug posts about living her best life with other women's husbands, had been deleted, but screenshots lived forever, regularly recirculating whenever someone new discovered the story. The best revenge, I continued addressing the audience, isn't about destroying others. It's about rebuilding yourself stronger than ever. And I had rebuilt myself. The money we'd recovered from David's fraud, including my grandmother's stolen inheritance, had been put to good use. Beyond the Women's Financial Freedom Center, I'd established a foundation that provided legal and financial assistance to women escaping abusive relationships. Claire headed up the legal aid division, while I focused on financial education and empowerment. Lauren had also flourished in the aftermath. Her role in exposing David's real estate fraud had earned her a reputation as someone who fought for justice. She'd since opened her own real estate agency, specializing in helping women achieve homeownership after divorce or separation. Sarah, another reporter, called out, "Your story has inspired many women to take control of their financial lives. Did you ever imagine that your personal tragedy would lead to such positive change?" I thought about that morning on my patio, when Jessica's message had shattered my world. How lost and betrayed I'd felt seeing those photos of David and Victoria, living it up in the Maldives with my money. If someone had told me then that their betrayal would lead to all of this, I wouldn't have believed them. Sometimes, I answered thoughtfully, we find our true strength in the moments we think we're weakest. When I discovered my husband's betrayal, I had two choices. I could be a victim, or I could be a victor. I chose to fight back, not just for myself, but for every woman who's ever been financially abused or betrayed by someone they trusted. After the ceremony, Lauren, Claire, and I gathered in what had once been Victoria's master bedroom, now converted into a cozy conference room where we counseled women on financial independence. "Remember how she used to post photos from this room?" Lauren mused, looking around at the transformed space. "All those smug-shot selfies with captions about living her best life in her dream home?" Claire chuckled. "How the mighty have fallen. Did you see the latest? She tried to apply for a job at one of the big real estate firms in Chicago, but they Googled her name and found all the fraud coverage." "Karma really is something," I agreed, but without malice. I'd moved past the need for revenge. Success, as they say, is the best revenge, and by that measure, I'd won completely. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus Reynolds, the forensic accountant who'd helped expose David's fraud. He'd become a regular consultant for our foundation, helping other women uncover hidden assets and financial deception. "You're not going to believe this," his message read. "David just tried to apply for a business loan using fake documents again. The bank recognized his name and called the authorities." I shook my head, almost feeling sorry for him. Almost. Some people never learned their lessons. "Speaking of lessons," Lauren said, pulling up an email on her tablet, "you've been invited to give a keynote speech at the National Conference on Financial Empowerment. They want you to share your story and talk about the Foundation's work." I smiled. thinking about how far I'd come from that betrayed wife drinking coffee on her patio. Who would have thought? David and Victoria's dream vacation ended up funding a movement. As we wrapped up the day's events, I took one last look around the center. Every room that had once housed their betrayal now served a purpose in helping other women rise above similar situations. The walk-in closet where Victoria had stored. The designer clothes bought with my money. Now it was a resource library. The luxury bathroom where she'd taken countless selfies. Converted into a comfortable meeting space where women could speak privately with financial advisors. You know what the best part is? Claire mused as we headed out. Every time someone Googles either of their names, they find the story of how their greed and betrayal led to the creation of this center. It's like a permanent digital reminder that karma is real. I nodded, thinking about how differently everything had turned out from what David and Victoria had planned. They thought they were building their perfect future with my money. But instead, they'd inadvertently funded their own downfall and helped create something truly meaningful in the process. As I drove home to my penthouse that evening, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain of betrayal had been transformed into purpose. The money they'd stolen had been reclaimed and redirected toward helping others. And I had emerged not just stronger, but with a clear mission and purpose. Sometimes I realized the worst betrayals really do lead us to our greatest purpose. David and Victoria had tried to destroy my life, but instead, they'd helped me find my true calling. And that was a kind of victory they could never take away. 2 years had passed since that fateful morning when Jessica's message changed my life forever. I sat in my office at the Women's Financial Freedom Center, looking out over the city skyline, reflecting on how completely life had transformed. A magazine lay open on my desk. I'd just finished reading their feature article about our foundation's impact on women's financial empowerment. My phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. "Turn on Channel 5 now. You're going to want to see this." I flicked on the office television just in time to catch a breaking news story. David had been arrested again, this time for attempting to run a small-scale investment scam at the car dealership where he worked. Old habits really did die hard. Local car salesman David Matthews, previously convicted of major financial fraud, has been arrested for attempting to deceive customers with fraudulent financing schemes, the reporter announced. Matthews, who lost his business empire 2 years ago after his then-wife exposed his massive fraud operation, appears to have fallen back into old patterns. I shook my head, feeling a mixture of pity and vindication. David had never learned. He couldn't seem to live without trying to scam someone. But this time, he'd face consequences without me there to negotiate a lighter sentence. My office door opened, and Claire walked in, already aware of the news. "Well, looks like David's going to be enjoying some state-sponsored accommodation for a while," she said with a slight smirk. "But that's not why I'm here. We just got the latest impact reports from the foundation." She laid out a folder filled with statistics and success stories. In the past year alone, our center had helped over 300 women escape financially, abusive relationships, recover stolen assets, and build new lives for themselves. We'd expanded to 3 new locations, with plans for 2 more in the works. "Remember Victoria's old social media catchphrase?" Claire asked. "Living my best life?" I saw her yesterday at that little diner on 4th Street. She's still waiting tables, wearing what looked like knockoff designer clothes. The mighty have fallen indeed. But Victoria's downfall wasn't just about losing her luxury lifestyle. She'd become a cautionary tale in real estate circles, her name synonymous with fraud and unethical behavior. The last time she'd tried to restart her real estate career, someone had made a viral video compiling all her old social media posts bragging about stealing my money and my husband, set against footage of her current life serving coffee and burgers. "Speaking of social media," Claire continued, pulling up her tablet, "have you seen the latest trending hashtag? Our financial freedom fighter. It started after your keynote speech at last week's conference." Women are sharing their own stories of financial recovery and independence. I smiled, remembering the conference. I'd shared my story, not just of David's betrayal and Victoria's cruel flaunting of their affair, but of how that betrayal had led to something bigger than revenge. The foundation wasn't just about helping women escape bad situations. It was about empowering them to build something better. "Oh, and this came for you," Claire added, handing me an envelope. It was an invitation to be the commencement speaker at the State University's business school graduation. The topic they wanted me to address? Turning personal crisis into professional. Purpose. Just then, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Jessica, who'd become one of our foundation's most active supporters. She was forwarding a message she'd received from Victoria, a desperate plea for help finding a job, claiming she'd learned her lesson and wanted to make amends. "Should we help her?" Jessica asked. I thought about it for a moment. The old me, the one who'd been consumed by thoughts of revenge, might have enjoyed Victoria's continued struggles. But I wasn't that person anymore. "Tell her to come to the center," I replied. "She can start by taking our financial literacy course, and if she's serious about changing her life, we'll help her find legitimate work. After all, she's a perfect example of why our program is needed." Claire raised an eyebrow. "That's very generous of you." "It's not about generosity," I explained. "It's about breaking the cycle. Victoria thought she could find security by stealing from other women. If we can help her learn to build her own security instead, that's one less person out there causing the kind of harm we're trying to prevent." Later that afternoon, I led a workshop for our newest group of clients, women who, like I once was, were dealing with financial betrayal and abuse. As I looked at their faces, I saw my own past reflected back at me, the pain, the uncertainty, the fear. But I also saw something else: determination, strength, and hope. 2 years ago, I told them, I was sitting where you are now. My husband had stolen my inheritance, drained our savings, and run off to paradise with his mistress. I thought my life was over. But sitting here today, I can tell you with absolute certainty that what felt like an ending was actually a beginning. One of the women raised her hand. "But weren't you afraid? Starting over from nothing?" I smiled, remembering those first terrifying days after discovering David's betrayal. I wasn't starting from nothing. I was starting with something powerful. The truth about my own strength. And that's what each of you has too. Strength you might not even know about yet. After the workshop, I met with Lauren for our weekly dinner. We'd made it a tradition, a time to catch up and reflect on how far we'd come. She'd just finished helping one of our center's clients buy her first home after leaving an abusive marriage. "Remember, when we thought the worst thing that could happen was discovering David's affair?" Lauren mused. "Who would have thought his betrayal would lead to all of this?" I looked around the restaurant, the same one where we'd sat a year ago, plotting my revenge against David and Victoria. Back then, I'd been focused on making them pay for what they'd done. I'd never imagined that their betrayal would become the catalyst for helping hundreds of other women find their own strength. "Life has a funny way of working out," I replied. "David and Victoria thought they were writing the end of my story. Instead, they just wrote the beginning of something much bigger than themselves." My phone buzzed one final time that evening. A news alert about David's arrest. The comments section was filled with people sharing links to our foundation's website, encouraging others to learn from my story. Someone had even dug up Victoria's old Instagram posts about their Maldives vacation, juxtaposing them with photos of our center's success stories. From paradise to karma, from betrayal to purpose, from victim to victor, the journey had been transformative in ways I never could have imagined. David and Victoria had tried to break me, but instead, they'd helped me build something unbreakable, a legacy of strength, hope, and real lasting change. And that, I realized, was the greatest revenge of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.